Hello, everybody. I have Pippa with me, and today we had a conversation about aliens, past lives. We talked about Atlantis for a little bit. Hitler was brought up just to keep that in mind. But it was all good. And then on top of that, we talked about Dolores a little bit, Pat, her sessions, QHHT. And for this episode, it will be part of the series that I'm kind of trying to work out the name. It will be mysteries from the quantum realm, or maybe I'm going to go with mysteries from the Stargate or the quantum Stargate. Which one you thinking? Which one you feel like has a better ring? I was trying to
Like
put the
that.
Stargate
Mystery is
into it.
good because it is mysterious. Yeah, mysterious because it's
So
the
I wasn't
topics
too
are
sure
mysterious.
realm, Stargate, but if I do Stargate, I can use my logo into it, connect it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So, or it could still be realm, but so that's here. This will be episode 2. This is something that I'm working on. This is something that I'm going to be coming out with and working on that series. Is that now, it'll just be basic conversation, just us talking about past lives, QHHT, and so on, and then anything else that comes up. And we talked about all kinds of interesting things. So yeah, I
Maybe
can
I'm thinking a collaboration too. We can have a collaboration with something, so we'll hold that space
absolutely.
for that. Mm.
Absolutely. So you're in New Zealand. Is there anything going on with the Queen passing? Is there like
Yeah,
ceremonies
we
or
we
anything?
have the 26th off, which is a week on Monday. Nice 3-day weekend, but I'm working that weekend, so it doesn't really matter. But at the same time, I think they've had a few little like parades and setting fireworks off and just a few little like things to kind of celebrate her. But what's quite interesting was when Philip passed a few months ago, I remember saying to Chris, she hasn't got long left. I don't think she'll get past the end of the year, really. I just kind of felt that with her, and I've noticed it with a lot of people, elderly people, when one dies, the other kind of follows. It's like the
Exactly.
contract's done. The contract's done. So,
Hmm.
especially if you've had a very long, long relationship and been in that kinship for, over 50 years, say, I've noticed it with a few people that have recently, left the planet. The soulmates kind of followed, you know.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, you've been together for all those years. You got that
Mm.
bond, and then now you lost that individual. So, you know, it's human nature to, all right, time to time to close this book and
Yeah.
in this chapter. I was just wondering what y'all were doing in New Zealand about everything that happened.
Yeah.
I think over here, I'm pretty sure our flags are half staff. So I saw
Mm.
2 flags, half staff. So I'm pretty sure that's what it's for. But we shall see what kind of energies change,
Yeah,
with
there's been
new
some big,
energy
big things
afterwards.
happening. Yeah, like COVID and all these different things happening right now. It's part of the ascension of the planet, isn't it? It's these change. They chose to leave at this time, didn't they, for whatever reason, to the help. I just believe everything in the planet right now is happening in divine order. There's nothing that isn't happening that shouldn't be happening.
Yeah, I know. I keep hearing that multiple times. Like everything's happening the way it needs to happen. Everything's doing what it needs to be doing. You're on the right track. You're on the right path.
Mhm.
Like, all right, cool. I'll go to work tomorrow.
Yeah, I
So how?
think I was just going to
Oh,
say about COVID, like how I just kind of COVID really was a blessing in a disguise because the amount of awakening since I kept seeing when I was meditating the other week, I kept seeing the phrase COVID made us conscious, COVID made us conscious. And I was like, that's so true. Like I do feel like these big disasters that happen on the planet, they're just meant to shake the collective to look within. That's why we were in the lockdowns, weren't we? To what else did we do? We just stayed indoors and we did, some people just started to explore more of themselves and they weren't in their usual life. They were in a different life and they were forced to look elsewhere. And that's kind of, I think, why the awakenings were happening. So COVID kind of did make a lot of people conscious.
when did you start doing QHHT?
Last year.
Last year? Okay. Did for this next question, I noticed it'll be more of a statement now. But I noticed like a lot of QHHT practitioners, their services kind of went up a little bit because now people are like, what's this all about? What's going on?
Curious,
Let me
yeah.
look into this. Now I have free time. Now I have this. And I feel like I need to work on me now. And so
Mm.
quite a few practitioners, their services were in high demand. So
Yeah,
I
and I
was
think
willing.
Dolores was kind of pushing people down that way because she does come through people's dreams and channeling sessions. So I think she knew this was going to happen, obviously. And I think because I did read this. I don't know if you read this, but Nostradamus, I'm sure he predicted COVID, didn't he? And she was channeling him for years. So I wonder if she's up there with him now saying, okay, COVID's happened. Let's get an influx of people to go and do QHHT. I was one of them, so I think that's probably what she's done. She's kind of planted these seeds like she did with my partner. She came through my partner's dream, and that was definitely a big sign for me.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So you mentioned your partner, Dolores came through his dream and he channeled Dolores too, correct?
Yeah,
So how
so
did that all happen?
well, we were separated because of COVID. So we had 18 months apart. Chris was in New Zealand and I was in the UK, and we were doing a lot of spiritual work. And I'd heard of Dolores, and my Reiki master told me to read Jesus in the Essenes. So I kind of, I bought the book, haven't read it yet, but I know that I'm going to be reading it at some point in divine timing. But anyway, I just kind of heard her and I thought, why is she coming into my vision, into my life? There's obviously a reason. So I didn't know anything about QHHT. And then next minute, QHHT was coming up on my Instagram, my Facebook, it was kind of just on, people's posts. So I looked into it and I just thought, oh, it's another tool. Let me just stay with what I've got. I don't need to keep doing loads of things. But again, the calling never leaves, does it? It was there every day. And when my partner channels, he channels at night. So when he goes to sleep, he puts the I Am Moses code on, which we listen to every night. And he goes through the spiritual doorway and he just sees who's there. And of a morning, if he remembers, he'll write everything down. So this time, and bearing in mind, Chris hadn't really heard of Dolores. He'd looked into like Michael Newton's work and Brian Wise and Dick Supton. So he'd kind of like, he'd knew about them more so. He'd heard of Dolores's name, but he never knew much about her. So he went to the door, he went through the door, and on the bench where he sits and talks to whoever's there was a little old lady. Well, I won't say little, but there was a little old lady there, and he asked who it was, and she said, "My name's Dolores Cannon." And she told him the year she was born, the year she died, and told him to read The Convoluted Universe, book 1. Now, bearing in mind, he didn't even know what that book was. He'd never heard of it. So to give a specific book was pretty profound. But then I was kind of questioning at the time, do I do QHHT? Should I not? I kind of was thinking about it. It just come into my life. So when Chris told me about that vision, I was like, there's my sign. She's come through. She's telling Chris to read a book. This is my time to go and do QHHT. So I didn't waste another minute. I just signed up and did it. And I did it over Christmas last year. So I was in lockdown. I actually was studying when I had COVID. I got COVID on Boxing Day, so I just stayed and just spent 4 weeks just immersing myself in the level 1, and that's how I kind of got into QHHT, which is pretty amazing.
Nice, nice. So did he read Convoluted?
He did, yeah.
Part
He's
one?
reading book 3 at the moment, I think. Yeah.
Okay, so he's up on 3. I've read all of the Convoluted Universe series, and number 2 is my favorite. And so I was just wondering what he thought about the first one or even the second one.
Yeah, I'll ask him that. He'll listen to this episode, so I'm sure he'll reach out and let you
Yeah,
know.
tell him to send me an email. Perfect. You mentioned the book Jesus and everything. That was one of the books I was going to buy at the event where they were having a class because they'll sell the books as well. And my mom was with me, and I asked her, I'm like, hey, they got this book on Jesus. And I was like, I know you're you're getting more religious and everything. I was like, would you be interested in this book? I said, I'll get it for you. And she goes, no, you don't have to. She's like, I'm good where I'm at. I was like, I don't know, this book could probably teach you a few things that might be a little different. No, I'm good. She's like, she's like, pretty much what she was saying was like, Jesus is in my heart, so, and that's what counts. I was like, okay. I said,
Yeah, definitely.
one day I'll read the book, the Nostradamus book as well. That's another one that's on my list to read, and then the book about Jesus as well. And I think she has 13 books.
Yeah, I'm kind of getting through Between Death and Life, and I think Chris has read that one. There's one, I can't think which one it was, but I was reading it, and it's where she's speaking to Phil. Phil's one of her clients, and he's going to all the different planets.
Okay.
And which one is that now? I can't think which it is, but it's funny because the client I had yesterday, that was probably one of the profound ones where it reminded me of the ones that she put in her books, where she would obviously use them as subjects to go and travel to different realms and different planets. And I was kind of like, oh, I can't wait for that. I can't wait for a client like that, because I think I'd want the client to come back and be like a subject so I can kind of go and explore. But yeah, that was kind of off guard yesterday. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, you can have multiple sessions, get multiple knowledge things down. So you mentioned that you had a client that came in yesterday that was talking about
Yeah.
conversation or something that related to it.
Yeah. I was really
That
blown
about?
away. Well, the thing is, I've had, as you know, Jason, because you do QHHT, every client's so different, and every past lives they go to are completely different. There's not one that's the same. And yesterday, a lady who I've been working with, she came for a session, and I didn't expect it because she was quite shy, and she had really healing energy, like really sweet, loving energy. And I just thought, I wonder how this is going to go. Like, because you kind of have an intention for the client, and you want them to have the best, session they can and get out what they want from the session. But she was so calm, and she was so like excited, which was really nice. So when she came off the cloud, she said, I can see red sand. And I was like, well, we don't really have red sand on this planet. So that was kind of a big, like a, what do you call it? Like a bit, okay, wow, that's a bit. And then she said she's in some sort of she's in a waiting room. And I was like, okay. But as you know, when you're doing the past lives, you're trying to see what they see. And it was because I've only done about 36 sessions now, something like that. So I'm still learning. I'm still like, kind of
That's
new to.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, thank you. So, but before I carry on with her story, I remember speaking to Suzanne, and my first 5 sessions for the intern, they were challenging. They were really challenging. And I remember Suzanne saying, well, Dolores sends you challenging ones because you can handle it. She won't send you any people that you can't handle. So I'll mention those after I've spoken about the client yesterday. But so this one wasn't a challenge. It was a deep one. We were talking for like 35 minutes in that life. So she was an information collector. So she wasn't male or female. She was just an energy. She was a form. She didn't have feet. She floated. And she had human hands that looked like human hands, but her head was grey, and it was like oval but round. And she said she would collect information using a leather satchel, but her whole body was covered in leather satchels. So that's where the information would she collect the information into this satchel. So I said to, if I'm trying to think, okay. And I have actually posted the life on my podcast today because I asked her for permission. She said, yeah, because I think the information for other people, as you know, it's not just for me and her, it's for everybody. And she mentioned the wall. She said, we store the information in the wall. And I was like, okay.
Uh-oh.
So I was like, where's this wall? And how I kind of saw it was, it's just in the universe. It's just a wall up in the universe. It's just,
Okay.
and as I saw it, the wall is the all-knowing. It's where all the information is stored. And she was talking about humanity and that, she can access 9 dimensions. She mentioned about there was explosions in space, and then new planets would be created. So she'd be sent there by the wall to collect the information before life is on the planet. And I'm just there like, I'm just going, this makes sense. But it's just the first kind of life I've gone to with a client where I'm like, I'm really intrigued. I want to know more. Like, so it and then eventually she said, that's all you need to know. So we moved on to another life. But anyway, she was just talking about not all planets have life. Not all planets are connected to this wall. The Earth is connected to the wall. And I said, how can people connect to the wall? She said, just by, connection, meditation. And she said, but you are connected, as in me. I was like, that's good to know. Thank you. And then,
and
it was just,
am I connected to this wall?
yeah. And so obviously how I was kind of seeing it in my mind's eye was that this wall is just this, I wouldn't say it's God or the universe. I would just say it's where the information is stored. It's where we can access. It's where we all can access the universal truths, as she said in the past life. This is the universal truths. So I was saying, do these change? She said, yes, as the universe changes, as it expands. And, some planets will disappear. So it's kind of like, and then she was talking about, we don't have time. It's just circular. Everything's circular, just going round and round. And then she spoke about, I was like, well, how are you created? How are you born? She said, we just are. There's no like beginning or end. So I'm like, oh, okay. And I was like, so do more of you get created? She said, no, we're just a constant existence. And I'm like, this is just wild. Like, just I'm smiling as she's under, and then she's talking about, and I said, do you know any of this information? Can you share this information? Like, obviously you're collecting it, but can you look at this information and tell us any of it? And she said, no, we just collect it and store it, The information is for the species. It's for life. It's connected to everything. So I was like, right. And like, because I'm getting goosebumps, like I can feel I'm getting all like, oh, because it was just for people to listen to it. I have posted it on my podcast today, just to listen to it and to take in, just because she even was whispering like this, when she was doing the past life, and it was so nice. And it was just, I had to lean in. I was like, what? Like,
speak up a little bit. Can you speak up?
Yeah. So I had to kind of like amplify it on the editing, because she was really quiet. And I think on a whole, just listening back to it, because it was just, I think people need to hear it. And as you said, like these past lives that even Dolores had gone to with her clients, she shared them in a book because they're not only for the client, they're for the collective. Right. So, and even the client, when she came out of the hypnosis, she's like, I did not expect that. And she was just absolutely over the moon. So, for the full thing, you can go and listen to it, but it was just about the connection, the universal truths, that we all have access to that. So for me, the message was to access it and know that universal truth is there for you to connect to. It's and these beings are collecting it for you. So just send thanks to them and send gratitude to them, because when you look up at the sky at night, it was quite cold here last night. Me and Chris stood outside last night and we just saw the Milky Way, and you can see just slightly the haze. That's my favorite thing to do with the Hubble field and the James Webb photos that have just come out. And then it made me think about when you just look up at night and you see all those stars, and you get lost. Like, where do we come from? Why are we even here? Like, what's the what was before all of it? Yeah, your mind goes over and over and over. So, and it makes me happy. It gives me that spark. It gives me that life. So that's what it felt like in the life. She was showing me that there is that life. There is other beings that we can't even comprehend in our brain that are collecting this information for us. So for me, it was about saying to them, thank you for being who you are, because for you, collecting information is so we can pass the knowledge on, and we can pass these universal truths on to our generation. And because it's like, Jason, when you channel something or you learn something, it's like you're awakening something you already knew. So for me, when I did QHHT, I said to Chris, I feel like I already know it, because it's obviously something I've learned in a past life. It's a universal truth that we all know. We all come from that truth. So yeah, it was a really good session.
Gotcha. Now, you mentioned your podcast, your session with your client is on your podcast. So if someone's interested in finding your podcast, how would they find it?
It's called The Conscious Combo, and it's on all the major platforms. So I know we're going to actually post this on both on our podcast. So I'll put your your notes on my notes and you can put my notes on your notes. So yeah, just go on my website, iampipaleslie.com, and then you'll just find it on there. It's on all major platforms.
Perfect. And I'll have a link in the description to her podcast, so you can just click on the link and you can find it quicker.
And you let me know what yours is so I can put yours on for my listeners.
Mine should be Q.R.E. Network. So if anybody's listening to this on Pippa's podcast, mine should be Q.R.E. Network. Now, I did change the name, but it should still be Q.R.E. Network. At first, it was Quantum Research Enlightenment, but I shortened it so I can make it easier.
Like QHHT, it's so much easier to say than quantum heliohypnosis technique.
Correct. Exactly. So, was anything else interested in that session? Did anything else interesting come from it?
I'm trying to think, because we only had time to do 2 lives because the session got to almost 2 hours. But yeah, I'm trying to recall anything else that came through that was quite interesting. Oh, and I asked her how she traveled. She said she just thinks of the place and she's just instantly there. And I was like, great, wish I could do that. Just can I just go home to the UK and see mum and dad? Just think of it and be there. So yeah, that was quite interesting. And yeah, I think I want to keep listening to it just to take in. I think even for me, when you listen to things over and over again, that's why I always ask the client in the hypnosis, you know, how many times should the client listen to the recording? And they say 2, 3, 5, 10 times. The more you listen to something, I feel like it integrates deeper into your soul. So for anyone who's had QHHT and they've got the recordings, I would say that is even if your higher self said twice, don't be afraid to listen to it more than twice, because you do integrate. It's like when you read a book for the second and third time, you take in more, don't you? And you watch a movie for a second time, you see different things. So yeah, I think listening to her past life again is going to integrate more so I can share more.
Has Dolores Cannon ever came through any of your sessions?
No, she hasn't, but I always feel like she sat there watching me. Like sometimes when I first started off, I was quite nervous, as you would be, because you don't want to mess up and you want to give them a good session. And how I felt more confident was I imagined Dolores was sat next to me, and that kind of helped.
Yeah, sometimes, you know, when I'm in a pickle, I'm like, what would Dolores Cannon do? You know?
Yeah.
She never came through, but she was mentioned in the session and that she is well loved. And I was like, okay, but nothing was brought forward, like no like communications about it. But I was like, okay, that's cool. But I will say that was pretty cool when I was this was probably like left the training, I'm done, I'm opening up shop, I'm cleaning out my office so I can have clients lay in my office and everything. And this one lady came for a session and she started talking about Anubis. She's like, there's this Egyptian god. She's like, I don't know how to pronounce his name. She called him Anubas. And I was like, Anubis? And then she goes, yeah. And I was like, matter of fact, I have like a little statue right here, you know, and I showed it to her. She goes, oh my God, yeah, that's it. She goes, that's what the picture came through. And so next thing you know, we go through the session, and sure enough, she's like, Anubis is here. I'm like, oh, what you mean Anubis is here? I like, here? So next thing you know, we were asking him questions and wanted to know, like, it was pretty cool, like why he has a dog face, you know, is it just a mask? Is it really his face, kind of thing? And it was a good answer to it. And it was pretty much saying like a familiarity that when you see a man with a dog face, that you know that it's Anubis. And then on top of that, it dealt with man's best friend, you know, that mankind has a relationship with animals like dogs and stuff. So that's the other reason for it. And then so evidently he travels to planet. And I was like, oh, I did not know that. I thought he was just stuck here. So those sessions, the videos on Guardians of Magic, but I did post those Atlantis and Ancient Egypt videos or audios on the podcast for Q.R.E. Network. So if anybody's
I
interested.
really want to listen to those, because what's quite funny, Jason, is I'm a massive Egyptian history nerd. And
Oh, nice.
yeah, so I spoke to Lily Blage yesterday. She's a QHHT level 3, and she mentioned Egypt. And every time I'm talking to someone, Egypt gets brought into the mix. So they're my little signs to say, like just a little. So every time you mention Egypt, I'm just smiling, because I actually wear the ankh. You can probably see I wear the ankh.
I saw
And
that.
yeah, so I'm actually studying Sekhem Reiki at the moment. So it's pronounced Sekhem. It's with the k. And it's quite interesting because I've been listening to the History of Egypt podcast. I've just found him, Dominic, and they're very more about the real history that they find, and but I'm more curious about the healing they did and the spiritual connection they had and things like that. And he's actually opened my mind up a lot with, Sekhem, you would relate to Sekhmet, which is the goddess of war and destruction and power. So he kind of opened my eyes up today about all the gods kind of mingling together, but they were certain, they were certain goddesses or gods like Hathor, who is more about protection and healing. So it's interesting how we kind of say, oh well, Sekhmet is the goddess of healing, but she probably isn't. So I'm learning a lot, and it's interesting to get other people's takes on it and their perspective, because I think there's not just one perspective, is there? And that's the key of life, isn't it? We all see things differently, and we all have different perspectives, and that's the beauty of life, isn't it? We all bring our uniqueness to the world.
Absolutely. Yeah, for me, for ancient Egypt, I kind of like a little bit of everything. I like what the historians are saying, what they're thinking. I also like to hear what whether it's ancient aliens or whoever those guys.
Yeah, the channeling side of it, the spiritual side of it, because it's the same with everything.
Side.
Yeah.
And the stuff that no one wants to talk about outside, like the conspiracies of ancient Egypt as well, who built it, who did not build.
I just never asked that question. I'd never asked the question of how the Egyptians healed, because they clearly had connection, and they were so in tune. And I just feel like, and I asked the question, how do they heal? And that's when I kind of started to channel the Sekhem. Sekhem kept coming, and I was like, I've never heard of that word. So I Googled it, and then I found the Sekhem Reiki course. So I've just been learning about it. But again, I'm learning it now, and it all resonates. I don't feel like same with QHHT. I'm listening to these videos, and I'm like, I already know this, but I'm taking it in because it's, it's resonating.
And you mentioned one of your older podcast episodes, you interviewed Suzanne Spooner, correct?
Yeah.
So you interviewed her, and I was listening to one of her sessions, her QHHT session that was posted on YouTube, and they started talking about the pyramids and everything. So they mentioned something about 2030. So I went back to my notes, and I have an Excel file, and I'm like, wait a minute, 2030, something else happens around 2030. I was like, well, hold on. And I went back to my notes, and then that session I was talking to you about, where that lady was telling me that Anubis was here. So one of the things she was talking about was like, she said, the angels and the watchers will walk among us again 10 years or less. So this was about 2019. Living in great times, our minds will expand, and hidden chambers will be found in the pyramids. So I was like, oh. And sure enough, I think about 2 years later or so, that client sent me an email of an article that they're finding stuff that's inside the pyramid that they can't explain, like hidden.
I read that yesterday. I'm getting goosebumps because I always felt
everything's lining up.
Yeah, it is. I get super goosebumps when I talk about things like this. So I when I thought about the pyramids, there's all the conspiracy theories about they got aliens to help them to build the pyramids, and there's so many possibilities, but I just believe they had so much manpower and they had so much strength. And I don't really know the ins and outs. I'm not a historian, but I did think, okay, if you're going to build up a pyramid, you're going to build down like they did with the tombs and stuff. So, I've never been to the pyramids, but I do believe this, like, the secret chambers and things they haven't even found yet. They were so in tune with themselves. And I think, I'm still learning a lot of it, but I just think there's so much underneath that sand that we haven't even discovered yet.
Oh, absolutely. same lady, same person, same session, and then that's on Guardians of Magic as well. But I don't know what episode it is, but it also, when it talks about the hidden chambers, it also talks about the Sphinx. And I heard that there was two of them. And then in her session, she said there is two of them. One got destroyed in an earthquake, and it's buried underneath mud and sand, and that will be revealed in sometime in the future. So I was like, okay. And she's like, there's a lot that is still buried. Just to go to
It's meant to be buried, though. We're only meant to find it when the time's right, isn't it?
And that's kind of like what she was saying, everything will be revealed in all due time. And I've heard that in a few other people's sessions as well, that things will come into fruition or into our reality when it is needed. So I was like, okay, that's fine. I was like, but still this lifetime, right? Like sometime soon, or is this going to be a long time from that? She goes, no, this would be your lifetime. This would be sometime soon. I said, okay. I said, exciting.
It is exciting.
In your research, I know that was one of the arguments, who built the pyramids, but has Atlantis or Atlanteans ever came up in any of your research or thoughts?
I wondered whether there was a structure already there and they'd built it up. I wonder if like kind of there was already something there, like a foundation was already there, and then they've obviously built on top of it. But I don't. There's just something.
I know
magical. There's just something magical about them because they're all lined up with the stars, and God, they're intelligent. They were intelligent. They were the civilization they lived were just, considering they had had no internet, nothing. They were literally living the basic life. Yeah. And that's what I think. So just connecting it back to COVID, I think that's why COVID just made us, and even though we had technology, we went back to basics. We were in our homes. We didn't have, our day-to-day normal lives. So I think, if I think back to it, but if I put myself into a basic Egyptian life, if I was kind of just some, farm family, and and you had these deities and goddesses and gods, like you would literally pray, and you would, because what would you do with your time? I just feel like there was more to connect to back then, and obviously there was a lot of poverty, as there is still now, but I think people and other pharaohs were quite strict. The guy today who does the podcast actually mentioned about, the breath of life can be quite toxic too, because he said there's always a polarity. He said that the breath of life was toxic because then he said something to do with the slaves asking for breath of life because he wanted mercy from the pharaohs and things like that. So there's just so much we don't know. So I think, I've not really explored Atlantis a lot yet. Maybe it will come into my future, but I know a bit about it. I do believe it was a civilization. I believe they were given the power of what we have now, but it wasn't meant. There was something that didn't sit right, and we can't abuse what we're given. We have to be grateful for what we're given. But what do you think? I'm asking you what you think.
So with the pyramids, I've heard multiple theories. Even in Dolores Cannon's book, it seems like there's multiple processes where an alien species helped with these pyramids. I've heard the Atlanteans built these pyramids. I've even heard the Egyptians themselves built the pyramids. So, and one of my thoughts was, at what time is that you're truly looking at the right time, and also what pyramid is also the right pyramid? And then you just start talking about different timelines and time frames and parallel universes, and all that comes into play, right? Because who knows where there's happening to. So sometimes it's like, is it the Great Pyramid, like the one that everybody knows of? Because from what I understand, that the Atlanteans had their version of pyramids as well, and they had their obelisk. And Sarah even confirmed that in one of her sessions, that when she had a past life reading and she was under hypnosis, that she saw these obelisk things, and she's like, why were they there? I thought that was an ancient Egypt thing. And I was like, well, technically I think that was something they used for energy. And I said, I think that just bleeded over to Egypt when a lot of people from Atlantis left Atlantean homeworld. When they left that area, some of them went to Europe and a lot of them went to ancient Egypt because they weren't welcome in Europe because of what they'd done in the past. And it was territorial. They felt like they were intruding on their land. So they had an opportunity to go to ancient Egypt because it wasn't as populated. And they brought a lot of their cool technology as well, and their training and their teachings. But it's very interesting, and I keep an open mind for all of it, whether it's this group, that group, aliens, ETs, I keep an open mind, and I just take my notes, listen, and then kind of like move along with it, and wherever the chips fall, I'll let them fall. So you mentioned the series Convoluted Universe, and I think it's part 2, and I think they start talking more about ancient times as well, so like ancient Egypt and different things. So I always find it very, very interesting because I'm a big fan of ancient Egypt information ever since I was a little kid. Always interested in it. As a matter of fact, I even have one of the books. So Nefertari.
Oh yeah.
He was here in New Orleans on display in the New Orleans Art Museum, and they had a whole exhibit of her belongings from the tomb and everything. So there was like a little bit of an exhibit and stuff. It was pretty neat to see all that stuff, And I've been to the museum in New York, and they have a huge Egyptian section as well. But it was pretty cool. Big fan of it.
Me too. I remember I went to China 3 years ago before COVID hit. We did the Terracotta Warriors. And I remember like just that, even that blows my mind. I love all the ancient stuff that's like, just stuff that just is, when you're there, you just know it's ancient. And I remember the lady who was taking us round, she was a guide, and she said they haven't opened up the emperor's tomb because of the booby traps. And that fascinates me because I was always into Indiana Jones, and I love all like Tomb Raider and I play Assassin's Creed, and I love all that, like, all that kind of stuff. And I remember being there, and I just was looking at these warriors that were built for the afterlife, and very similar to how like Egyptians would have created their tombs and put things in the tombs to take with them. But again, if you think of that dynasty doing that, the ancient Egyptians have probably built tombs with booby traps that we haven't even discovered yet, and that may be what's under the pyramids. I don't know, like I just think if you're going to build up, they build down too, because they used to build steps, didn't they, down to the tombs and things, so they weren't dumb. They were so intelligent. So if you're going to build up, they'd build down. So it'd be quite interesting to see what they start to uncover over the next couple of years. And again, divine timing, things are being discovered at the right time, aren't they, for when we
absolutely
are meant to receive them.
To go along with what you're saying, one of the things that I always thought was interesting, and I couldn't wrap my mind around it early on, was that, I don't know what book it was, but it talked about how some of these chambers and tombs are built in another dimension. So that was their way of hiding their information, their belongings. They said, you won't find it now because you're not at the right frequency yet. And that chamber's in another dimension. I'm like, what? Like, what you mean?
That would make sense, though. I don't know if you've watched I need to reactivate my membership, but I was with Gaia for a while, and there was a documentary on the guy who went into Africa and he found all those vortex, the stone circles. And he said he found a couple, then he ended up finding thousands of them. So we got some guy to come out to measure the frequencies and the energy of these circles, like obviously to see if there were any differences and things like that. And I this was a couple of years ago, I watched this, and this guy had this frequency machine, and he would step into the circle and the frequency bar would go up, and then he'd step out the circle and the frequency bar would come down. But then he went to different circles, and each circle measured different frequencies. Again, that would represent us. I have a frequency, you have a frequency, we all have different frequencies. But then he wanted to, measure, where's the frequency coming from? Where's this energy coming from? And when he measured that, it's straight up. So the energy went straight up into the universe. And I was like, oh my God, this is fascinating. So we ended up saying these are probably people's vortex, as Abraham Hicks would say the vortex of your energy. So that protection of you would step into that, into that circle, and you would channel, you'd sit, you'd do whatever. But I just found that fascinating. So maybe that's what was kind of happening with the pyramids too, and the chambers and the dimensions, is that, the more you do some sacred work, especially for me being a Reiki master, the more I do Reiki in this room, I can feel the energy, because you're consistently doing the energy work in one position, aren't you? So you start to have, like, you may end up having a portal appear, or you start to feel frequencies go higher and things. So I'm the same as you. I have an open mind to everything. I just think there's so many possibilities to what we can see and what we actually don't know.
Nice. Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Has any information of aliens, like anyone being a past life as an alien, came through any of your sessions?
No, I would probably say the closest one was yesterday, because she the way she kind of described herself, she looked a bit like an alien because her skin was grey. That was probably the only really one that I had a lady who was pure energy. She was plasma before Earth was created. That was interesting.
Oh no.
And she would just move like energy, and she could go wherever she wanted to. And I said, are you near Earth? Earth isn't created yet. I was like, wow, that's a long time ago. So she and she'd go near portals, and she said, no, that's not a nice portal. And then she'd move away, and I don't want to go through that. I was like, you don't have to, just move away from it. And then she'd go to like another portal, and she'd go, this is a good portal, I'm going to travel through it. And it literally was, like the games, like, it reminds me of Crash Bandicoot. When on Crash Bandicoot you go to a realm and you go through that like spinny hole. I remember like thinking that's what it's like, going through these dimensions. And I think if we can open our minds up enough, we can reach those dimensions.
The ones that are talking about how they have an energy body, I find a little bit more interesting, even though the alien bodies is always pretty cool. One thing I do find is that when they're like, yeah, I don't really have a body, but when they're talking about everything that's happening, it sounds so real. Like the way they touch and feel things, and the way they sense everything. It's like they might have an energy body, but they still have something like a consciousness that deals with it and everything. Like they do have a body, but in reality they don't. So
Yeah,
I
she's
always
like
thought
it
that was cool.
yesterday. Well, she said that yesterday. I asked her how she communicated with other beings like her. She said they just chirp like birds. And I was like, oh. So I was like, well, do you contact telepathically? She went, we don't really need to make contact, but if we do, it's like chirping, like a bird. And I was like, I could just imagine them going. So that was kind of interesting. But I think, was it Dolores's client? I think it was when they were God, what was it now? She's obviously had past lives where they've gone to be aliens, but I think, I've started. I don't read the news. I'm not a news person. My partner has it on. He goes on Reddit, so he picks up little bits and bobs. But I think Trump wants to bring out alien news, doesn't he? I think he wants to, like, I don't really follow a lot of Trump's work, but I read an article where like he's sulking, and he wants to kind of bring out some classified information, which I do believe that there's stuff out there that we don't know, and they're keeping us ignorant, because it would, people who aren't awake and aren't connected, they would freak out if I saw an alien. I'd be like, oh my god, can I talk to you? But I think a lot of people would be like, oh my god. So I think,
Sit down. Oh, look, there's a microphone. Let's do this
would you
podcast
like a
thing
cup
that we
of tea?
got.
I'll make you a cup of tea, and like, do you want to sleep over? There's a spare room. But
I
yeah,
have
I
a bunch
think,
of questions for you.
yeah, I think I do believe there was a podcast, and my partner, when he listens to this, he'll laugh, because I tell everyone about it, and it's called The Last Podcast on the Left. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Yeah,
But
that sounds very familiar
there are a
because
load of guys that kind of
yeah.
bring on anonymous guests and things. I haven't really listened to a lot of it, but my partner Chris, at the time, we were in Los Angeles, and we were on Huntington Beach, and we were doing a little ritual with like, we had the fire pit going, and he put this like spooky episode on, and one was about a guy who saw these. Every time I try and tell this story, Chris laughs at me and says, you're not doing it justice. I was like, no, you need the episode, because the music's in the background. It's like, dude, like ghost, like X-Files.
Yeah.
It's like,
The
so
guy has red hair, right? The
I
podcast
think
host?
so. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a really
he's on a
interesting
TV
one.
show.
Yeah. Well, there
Hmm.
was two stories. One guy, he found a letter in the archives of a guy who wrote a letter home in the World War One, And he said he was of sound mind, and that, he just wanted to explain something he saw. So there is that possibility of he probably was shell shocked, I don't know, or he might not have been a sound mind, he might have just said he was. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, he said there was, I'll have to try and find it, and I'll send it to you, I'll put it in the notes or something like that. But he was talking about, there was, on the trench line, everything was quite quiet. And he said if you just peeked over the trench, you could see like the Germans like just with the lanterns, so you could see like, if they were going up and down their trenches, you could just see lights with the candles and things. But he said one night there was a load of commotion and no one was firing from their side, on the English side. But then when they looked up, him and his men saw this big black figure that was probably about 20 feet tall, and he was pulling the Germans out of the trenches and just ripping them apart. And I was like, oh my God, that's free. It gives me goosebumps. Like, oh. So I was thinking, is that something that came in to intervene? I don't know, like, because it wouldn't have been, and that he can't find any records of that man surviving. So I don't really know what happened, but you'd have to listen to the full story. But the
Mm-hmm.
second guy he had on was a guy who stayed anonymous, and he used to work at Area 51, and he was talking about what they were working on. And he said he was like security, so he'd go on different levels, and he said one level they were working on these like robots that, on Matrix, where they're on Avatar as well, where they sit in them and they use the arms, and then it's these big machines that kind of coordinate with them. They were
Gotcha.
working on stuff like that. So there's clearly things that we have no idea about. Our technology is so far on, and I'm thinking, why has technology only been given to us now? Why in the last 100 years has technology been given to us? Was that the same as Atlantis? Were we given this technology then, and something went wrong? And
Oh yes, it goes hand in hand, because that was one of Atlantis's downfall, was because they held on to a lot of their technology, and that's why when they folded, and no one really has all this advanced tech that they used to have, because they held on to it. Plus, from what I understand, it kind of made sense. You just have to have a certain type of crystal, and without the certain type of crystal, some of their technology will not work. And it was a red crystal, from what I understand, that Sarah was talking about. And some crystals you could use, and you can use it with the certain technology objects that you had, this equipment, but without the proper activation for these crystals, you wouldn't be able to power up these things that they had. And that's why a lot of things is still a lot of mystery, like the pyramids, the obelisk, and everything. It all kind of went hand in hand, and they had a process and a technique. And when they held on to all that knowledge, and it was for a number of reasons, and it dealt with competitive edges, just like America tries to have the competitive edge. During war times, they don't want their predecessors to have all this advanced technology just like them. They want the leg up as well, while you're playing around with these certain jets and certain equipment, battleships. And if you ever notice, a lot of our equipment, and whether it's tanks, ships, planes, looks very similar to everybody's country, because we're all creating the same things, but in reality, behind the scenes, they're creating stuff that's, I've been told, 50 years, 100 years in the future, that we can't even believe that they're creating. And I was like, I believe it. And then, so with that being said, so like, let's say if the US or the world was to fall and collapse, we would not have access to none of that stuff, because it's all lock and key. And just like when Atlantis fell, they didn't have enough time to take all their technology and knowledge out of there. Some places did take it, but throughout the years, the decades, and centuries, a lot of that knowledge just died down more and more and more, and the teachings went away as well. So, but
yeah, you think about, there's just the technology we have, this laptop, TV, PlayStations, tablets, Wi-Fi, the list is endless. There is a section of people that could switch all that off. So really, it isn't ours, is it? It's So I think, why, but I'm such a deep thinker. I always was as a kid. I was that type of kid that would get up early and ask my mum and dad questions at 8 in the morning, and they'd sit there and go, Pip,
Mom,
just,
mom.
yeah, what's this? What's that? What's this? And then as I got older, me and my dad would just have those long conversations about Earth and planets and space. And but I just think, why now? Like, why were we given technology like fast paced in the last 100 years? Like, why was it not given to them 2,000 years ago? Again, the level of everything's divine timing, but are we abusing it? Because, as a spiritual awakened person, and as you would probably agree, Jason, is that sometimes I don't want to be off the grid. I don't want internet. I just want to be off in nature. And it's hard because it's an addiction too. It's constantly there. It's constantly in your home, isn't it? And I think it's being able to use it in the right way. You see, I've got 2 stepchildren and they're constantly on, tablets, TVs, computers, and but I was the same growing up. I grew up in the 90s. I was born in 1990. So, I had my first mobile when I was probably like 12, 13, and they were them little Nokia, playing Snake.
Oh yeah,
And
Snake game.
but think of the last 20 years, how much, like, now I've got a Samsung phone, which is just like, I don't even need a camera. Like, everything's just on. It's just insane. It's just absolutely insane. Like, and like you just said, in 100 years' time, I don't think we can even imagine what we'll probably look back at, like 2022, and think, oh God, that piece of crap Samsung. Like, now we've got these like holographic things, or we'll have our mobiles in our hands or something like that, like in our skin. It's just, we can't imagine it, can we?
No, evidently, from my notes, if I remember correctly, some of the things was that we'll have better understanding of light technology, and then also understanding more information of the human cells.
Yeah.
So the true meaning of a virus and how to manipulate a virus and the molecules and the energy in the cells. So I was supposed to be 2025, and we're supposed to know more about aliens in 2025. So far so good, and
Yeah, the question I asked my partner the other day was, okay, so if alien race has been to Earth and the CIA and the governments are covering it up, say, for example, why are the aliens only going to certain places? Why are they not just coming down to New Zealand and going, hi, Pip, come down to speak to you? Why are they only going to, like, are they being monitored? I don't know, like, because I would think, how would they come to Earth? Because some people believe that there's aliens on our planet right now, and they're just, some say that we're the experiment.
okay.
They've manipulated our DNA and we're the experiment.
Mm-hmm.
And people say that when we're in our dream state, that's the reality. So there's just
Right.
mind blowing. Again, I don't believe one or the other. I'm just open to like the discussion around that.
So you have a question that kind of deals with, like, why haven't they introduced themselves now?
Yeah, to different parts of the planet. If they, if they've been, say for example, Area 51, even though that's probably moved now, if they're working on alien species, if they're like kind of doing whatever they're doing with them, why are not more aliens coming down to say, hey, we're here, just, don't let
Oh
them.
man, there's so many answers. Oh my gosh, there's so many answers to go along with all
Is
that
it
stuff.
timing? Are we not ready? Are we not, do they think we're not
It deals
ready?
with a number of factors. So this is just from my knowledge, because I asked myself the same question, and I throw that question around as well, and I kind of got, some pretty interesting feedback. So to answer some of that stuff, and I always this will answer a lot of it, is that ET races throughout time, throughout thousands and thousands of years, have been here multiple times. Like, same lady, matter of fact, when it dealt, I'm going to bring up ancient Egypt with the pyramids and stuff. So in that session, she said that the angels walked among us during that time. And I kind of asked, well, why during that time? Because they had a sense during that time of Egypt that they visited, they felt like there was love, there was compassion for the people, there was love for the people. So they walked among us around that time, and they fell in love with humans, and and humans fell in love with them. So there was a lot of love with them. And then they were helping us, we were helping them, and things were coming together. But from what I understand, like, greed started kicking in, humanity started kicking in. So another tribe came in, and they wanted they were like, well, forget this love stuff. We want your goods. We want your technology. And then there was hate towards them. And it kind of dealt with energy, and they're at a higher vibration. And so it's like, well, we can't intervene right now. We're only here to help, and they couldn't intervene. And so they did some bad things. The other tribe did some bad things, and they had to wind up leaving. And then another time, even during Atlantis times, they said that they used to come and go, alien races used to come and go during Atlantis times because they had a lot of knowledge for crystals. And I thought this was amazing. So they had a lot of knowledge for crystals, and they wanted this to know, how did these humans on Earth know all this stuff about crystals, and how did they know it, and what can they teach us? So they had, you would call it a stargate, a portal, and they will come and go. But then again, Atlantis was going on a downfall because there were a number of things were going on. They started experimenting too much with a lot of things. Things started getting worse and dense. And then it was like, all right. So each time everything started getting worse, whoever at the higher level was like, all right, timeout. Whatever council 12 or 9 was kind of like, all right, timeout, people. You stop visiting Earth right now. Take a break. Let things cool off. And then they can't mix up their karma with ours and then lower their energy, because you're talking about like psychic powers and their connectivities with their home races and their home planets. So it's kind of like it was a very thin layer of like what they could do and not do. And another thing that, fast forward to today, it's kind of like one of the cool things that I thought was recent times is that, one of the things that one timeline, JFK was going to declare that aliens are real. They walk among us. They're with us now. They've been visiting us, blah, blah, blah. And at first, no one really, from what I understood, no one really caught on at first. Then once when things started getting worse, like whether it was the economy, whether it was this, whether it was that, next thing you know, different groups started blaming these alien races, saying that it's their fault. They're the blames. But JFK at that time did not know all that was going to happen. I think he was even warned not to disclose all that, and he wanted to. So that was one timeline that played out, and then it was like chaos, like mankind fell to a dark period of their lives. And then so this timeline, since now JFK was assassinated, now you look at this timeline, it's like, all right, should we intervene again? Should we make ourselves known again? And then an agreement was made, and it was kind of like, don't intervene, but now when the time gets closer and closer, you can start slowly disclosing stuff. And there was an agreement saying, keep us a secret, we'll talk to your political leaders, and there's technology that's being traded. And that's even in Dolores Cannon's book, that technology is being traded. Use this technology for good, use it for the people, but don't use it for bad things. Well, you know how scientists are and military, they start saying, how can I use this on the battlefields? And how can I use this to make my nation more powerful? And so with that, it's kind of like, hey, I can't intervene because we had an agreement, but now the time is getting closer and closer to where it's like, and then it's even been said in other sessions that once when humanity reaches a higher level, whether it's the 4D or 5D, once when humanity gets to that level of consciousness, then it's like, okay, they will be in a better place. Then we can make ourselves known. So, yeah, and it was probably a little bit more answers to that, but
yeah, it's so interesting. That's kind of like what I believe that too. Yeah.
Because that question's on my mind now. It's like, why didn't y'all come out, after World War II, like, hey, yeah, guys, I need to clean up all this stuff. Y'all need to stop doing these things. And everything had a reason. Oh, the other thing I wanted to add was that, humanity likes a good challenge. So humanity wants to do things on their own. They like all the free stuff from alien technology, but humanity still wants to do their own, and then they don't want to mess up our path, and they still want to see what we're able to create on our own. So they don't want to intervene as a society. They want to see what we can create and how will we use it as a whole. Whether it's, you mentioned the iPhone or the computer or the tablet. What will, as human race, what will we do with this information? And then also, like, you got all this political corruption going on, and if they were to intervene and say, no, this is wrong, this is right, this is how it should be, and we were ever to look back on it, be like, man, we could have cleaned up our act ourselves. Why did y'all intervene? We're, not that everything is roses, but we're on a certain path, and it's like, what would things be like if y'all didn't intervene? So you had that timeline as well.
Yeah.
So
I'm just watching this little spider. I'm not a big fan of spiders, so I'm like, what do you want? Why are you coming closer to me?
Oh, maybe he wants to join in on the podcast.
Maybe he does, because he's kind of like, he's one of those jumping ones, the little ones that just jump.
Oh, like a wolf spider kind of thing?
They're dead small, yeah, and he's just super fast. I've just been watching him. He caught my eye near the sofa, and he's like right near me. I'm like, hi.
I thought you was looking at a cat or something, or a dog.
No, my dog's all asleep on the sofa. She's all comfy in the sun. Yeah, there's a lot of, I don't know if you just came into my mind when you mentioned JFK, because I was looking at JFK yesterday and the links to
A lot of things happened yesterday, I see.
Yeah, there was. Yeah, so there was that the death of JFK and the death of Lincoln, and I actually thought, I wonder if JFK was a reincarnation of Lincoln because of all the similarities to there was like the dates and the killers, and so I'm wondering if Lincoln didn't finish what he started, so he reincarnated. Yeah,
the secretary, similar names. Yeah, too many coincidences. Too many.
Yeah, there's just them nights where you just want to sit and talk about life and you just want to put the world to right. It's like, honestly, I just love those nights. And because we're coming into spring and summer now, I've said to my partner, I just want to sit outside and stargaze and just get lost in all the possibilities of what is. And then the thing is, we're doing all this work and exploration and healing, and we're doing all this, like, we're in information overload, but then when we die, we know it all anyway. So it's like, it's kind of like, that's why I'm letting go. I'm just like, I'm letting go. I'm allowing any information in. I'm letting it flow in and out. And then when I've passed on, I'm back I've absorbed into consciousness, into source. I'm like, oh, now it all makes sense. It's good. I'm happy, So it's like, for me, I wanted to know everything. That perfectionism as a human, I wanted to know everything. I wanted to absorb everything. And like I said to Chris the other day, I was like, I just want to be able to read all the books on the planet, and clearly that's not possible. But again, absorbing everything we can. But at the end of the day, we absorb back into the universal truths anyway. So
interesting. So when you're in your backyard and you're looking into the galaxy, and you thought of the meaning of life. Has that come across? And what you thought?
So Chris is reading a book. I think he's finished it now. It was something like, why are we here? Why do we even exist? Like, why? Basically, like, it's a wreck your brain type of book where, like, what's the point? Why are we here? Like, why was the universe created? What was before the universe? Like that. Them kind of topics just make me go, whoa. What's beyond? Is there an end to the universe? Do we come back in? Does it just keep going round and round and round? Is it just, so it's obviously infinite, and that's kind of like what we are. We're an infinite part of that. So I think the meaning of life, I have a bit of what Dolores says. You came here to learn. The earth is the hardest school to come to. So I do truly believe that.
Congratulations on being on Earth.
Yeah, like, woohoo.
Here's your t-shirt.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it makes sense. Like, you think about, you are drawn to certain places in the world, but I just, the meaning of life, I think it is to experience. I think God sent us here to he wanted to experiment what it was to be human. I think I think there's all these different species that we can't even comprehend on all these different planets. And I think we all experience those. I think we've all experienced being a horse, a dog, a cat, a lion, every species that is in this universe. And again, we only know what's on our planet. We know there's alien races, but again, we don't even know what exists out there. There could be other humans that are very different. There could be other humans that are more advanced than us. There could be an Atlantis somewhere on a planet somewhere. We don't know, do we? So I think we decide, I'm going to go to Earth to learn in the image of God, in the image of love and God. So I think God just says, okay, you lot go and be human, you lot go and be dogs, you lot go and be aliens and experience what I've given you, and to experience in this life. And that's why I think we reincarnate, because it's okay. Human was okay. It was quite challenging. I found it hard, but I learned quite a bit. Now I'm going to go and be a different type of human on a different planet that I couldn't even think of, because I clearly don't know what's out there. But yeah, but that's kind of the question, isn't it? What's the meaning of life? Why are we here? Why are we here? What do you think?
Well, as complicated as life is, it was, from what I understand, it was kind of a simple answer. And it was to experience anything and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So, and Source, God, wants to experience everything. And that just feels totally true, that the experience, that's kind of like when people say, like, you need to live your best life, or you need to continue living. If you ever see like a soul not living or doing anything, they kind of like dwindle away. They kind of like go to rest and they die. And so it's all about experiencing anything and everything, whether it's good or bad, to experience as much as possible. And that's kind of like why, I don't know, going to use some of my friends as an example. That's why some of these individuals always just doing things, traveling, and always going certain places and doing certain things. Or like every weekend they want to go do something. Even Karen, when Saturday or Sunday's coming, she's like, all right, so what are we going to do today? And I'm like, I thought we were just going to stay home and relax. I thought, I got work Monday, no, let's go do something. And then, so with that being said, it's all about experiencing new things. Is there anything that you ever wanted to experience? And you would think, well, everybody already experienced all that stuff. But from what I understand, Source wants to know, how was it experienced through your eyes? How was it experienced through what you did? And that's just the good stuff. And then also the bad things as well. Someone's thinking, what about the bad things? And this was hard for me to wrap my mind around. It was kind of like, well, that was a bad thing that happened to that individual, or that was a bad thing that happened to me. But it was like, also, true, you experienced that. All right. What did that feel like? All right. What did you do afterwards? And what did you do, 20 years from now after that experience? And, is it affecting you, not affecting you? Did you move on from it? Did you teach someone else? And so it's like, okay, that was interesting way of putting it. And so that's kind of like how I wrap my mind around it, the meaning of life, and how I've learned about it and the conversations that we've had. It was kind of like to experience those certain things, and then how was it for you? What did you learn from it? What did you do with it? What did you do later on? Anything and everything. What was it like to experience that situation, and then it affect you for 20 years or 30 years? And not a lot of people say that. Some people brush certain things off. They're like, I'm done with that situation. I moved on. What was that like, to brush that off and move on? So as complicated as life is, it kind of deals with all that. And then you also think about the 3D reality. And this was a conversation that me and Sarah was having in her work. So she wrote, probably can't see it now, but she wrote the hypnotist journey through to Atlantis and everything. She did the Sphinx book as well, book 2. And she found out more about our race, our lost history that hardly anybody's talking about. And it was kind of like we've been in 4D, 5D, 6D, whatever dimension you want to think of. We've been in all those dimensions for eons, a very long time. It's kind of like we've probably spent the majority of our time around the 5D, from what I understand. And we had an opportunity to start living life in a 3D reality, a dense reality. And how dense, and that was part of programming too, how dense can we get? How far can we get from source and experience these new things? And also to experience these things, another thing that I thought was cool, it was from Suzanne Spooner, was that that's another reason why we don't remember our past lives. We kind of start fresh. I have a fresh thinking. I'm not worried about what my buddy did to me in my last life. He might have shot me in the head, but that's okay. We moved on. I don't remember it. Now we're creating new memories and new experiences. It was pretty cool to hear it like that. The guy said that was one of the greatest ideas and gifts that he's given to mankind, was to not remember, so you can have those new experiences. And so I was like, oh, well, it's all about experience when it comes down to it. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go experience riding on a jet ski, have some fun, do certain things, you mentioned nature, go out in nature and everything's experienced. Even the smallest little things that we take for granted for a higher dimensional being would be like, well, what was that like? To walk, let's say, the forest or Mother Nature, and not knowing that there's fairies or leprechauns or whatever in another dimension, and we're just walking through it because we can't see it. What was it like to not know none of that stuff around your surrounding? You can't see it. So I was like, okay, all right, interesting, duly noted.
Yeah, I think it's having the open mind, isn't it? We get so wrapped in, we just get so wrapped up in this 3D life, and I think sometimes that's why I think we get heavy and emotions bring us down, and we're just like, oh, what am I doing with my life? And you have these little mini midlife crises, but you actually start to realize there's no set way, there's no instructions. I weren't given a manual at 16 and said, there you go, is adult life on its way, you just make it your own. But I think
it's like, here you go, figure it out.
Yeah. I take a lot of my teachings from Wayne Dyer, and he just says, about, a question I want to talk to you about in a second is the ego. Like, why are we given this ego? It's like, oh my God, like I do a lot of work around the ego, and I've kind of let go a lot of it, but I am tested. I ask for tests, I ask for lessons, and they're given to me. But going back to what you said about experience, is like, I'm the same as you. I have a hard time explaining, because I understand it, but to people who don't understand it, it's hard. It's a very touchy subject, is the level of the bad, quote unquote, the bad things that happen to us. I don't know if you've read the book Conversations with God, Neil Donald Walsh.
Yep.
A really good book series. He channeled, it was in the 90s. A lot of questions are answered there, and it's about, this, he says this conception that heaven and hell exist, and that people who've done wrong go to hell, and religion's kind of created that. And he actually said such a good point when he asked about it. He said, okay, so do all the bad people go to hell? And God replied, well, where's the line? Where do I put the line of, okay, that's all bad and that's all good? So example, a murderer, someone who's committed arson, robbery, someone who's just stole, just the bad things would be classed as bad. Everyone's bad perspective is different. So he said, where do I put the line? Where do I split the line of what's bad and what's good?
Right.
That's not for me to judge. He said, and he said, every single person goes to heaven. And there was a topic in the book, and I don't know if I want to bring it up because this is the hard bit of not wanting to bring things up because you don't want to offend people. But isn't this the point of just bringing it up? Because I've read it in a book, and when I speak about it, it gets you to think outside the box. It makes you think on a deeper level. So I think I am going to say it because I've never said it on
All right, magic hour.
Right, drum roll. So he said, if there's no fine line between heaven and hell, then Hitler went to heaven. So I sat with that and I said, if you stood on a stage in front of the whole world and said Hitler went to heaven, you would get thrown things at you. You would have people you just have people not happy with that statement.
Right.
But when I sat with it, I thought, he's got a point though, hasn't he? It's like, okay, so yeah, Hitler was one of the most, as we would judge him, as an awful man in our history that caused so much pain and suffering. But what he said so Neil in the book was like, what? Can you elaborate? This isn't right. He caused so much pain. And God replied and said, he was only allowed to do what he was allowed to do because he had a following. He had people allowing him to do that. So he had a following, he had a collective under him. And I was like, that's true. That if no one followed him, if no one kind of went, yes,
right,
he wouldn't do it. He wouldn't do it. They enabled him. They enabled his ego to do whatever. So I kind of thought that does make sense. Now,
they did put him in jail. I think twice they put him in jail.
Yeah, but can you see how that phrase, just that statement, is deep and it's uncomfortable. It's an uncomfortable phrase, isn't it? It's an uncomfortable statement.
Mm-hmm.
Go back to, I don't know, who else is a big baddie of our past? Try and think of someone who's bad in our history. I mean, Hitler's like up there with one of the most. But
well, I can add information to that as well that I always thought was interesting. So before I talk about that, one of the things that I thought was interesting, and I think this was on American History Channel, that a soldier had the opportunity to shoot him because they were down there in the trenches. He got up after one of the mustard gas things. He got up later on after everybody was kind of dead. There was still two guys alive, and everybody else was kind of dead, wounded, just disasters everywhere. And Hitler didn't have his gun, from what I understand, but the other guy did, and he could have killed him. But when they looked at each other, kind of like, man, everything's gone. Like what's the point? You know what I mean? Like, what's the point of killing each other now? Like, everybody's gone and there's like chaos everywhere, and they kind of went their separate ways. So, and another thing that was interesting, and I don't know what book it's in, but one of the things that was mentioned with Hitler was that, yes, he did a lot of bad things, and that was very interesting. Where do you draw the line at? It's like, is it two people? Okay, that you kill one person, two people, where do you draw the line at? One of the things that was very interesting, because they talk about some of the visions that he had, and I remember another session where they're talking about how he misunderstood a lot of the messages that he was getting. And then one hand, he was getting all these messages, and on the other hand, he's misunderstanding all these messages. And I thought that was very interesting that they were talking about this on TV, how he's having all these visions of all this stuff. And in ancient times, he had these visions of the future, the ancient times, ancient Egypt, Atlantis, from what I understand. And that's why he had more of that interest in the occult section. And he was trying to find all these powerful objects as well. So one of the things that was one of his messages, this was an opportunity for him to start opening up the new age type of information. So on one hand, he was looking for all this occult stuff. Like, he felt drawn to all this occult stuff. Yeah, he wanted to use it for bad things. But he wanted to start opening up people's minds as well to all this other stuff. And then he found it interesting. And also some of the people that was in his circle found it very interesting, whether it dealt with inner earth, or I know he was looking for the spirit destiny, but to go beyond that, this ancient knowledge. And that's why he was so assured that they were related to the Atlanteans, the Vikings or whoever, and that they had all this great information. So he was getting the information, the downloads, but he wasn't interpreting it. And they were like, so in the session, they were kind of like saying, yes, he misunderstood a lot of that. And I was telling that story to someone else, and the guy goes, you think he misunderstood it? Yeah, I think he misunderstood it a lot. I was like,
Yeah.
I know, true.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think just it's misguidance, isn't it? It's I think if you bring in the scientific stuff, he probably had a very traumatic childhood and he didn't deal with it. So
Correct.
he was constantly, what's the ego's default? I want to be offended. The ego's looking to be offended consistently. So that's probably what his default was on an extreme level. And, it's happening now in a different way. People in power, it's a consistent need for that, to feel worthy of that. So maybe his followers gave him some sort of worthiness because he probably didn't feel that. You just don't know. You just really don't know. All we know is that through the last 50 years of history, people have just made out that these people are monsters, and we're conditioned to say, oh yeah, Hitler went to heaven, went to hell, and it's. But what about if you just what's the word? If you just like question your thinking, open your mind, have different possibilities. Because again, when I read Conversation with God with Neil Donald Walsh, I'm actually interviewing him in a couple of weeks on my podcast just to kind of talk to him. But it's like, to say those things, it takes a lot of courage. And it's, again, if people get offended by it, it's then just to question yourself and say, okay, why am I getting offended? And it's all about that expansion, isn't it? And that's all the ego work is. So it's, Wayne Dyer says ego stands for edging God out. And that's the perfect representation of it. So when we're in ego, we're not in alignment with higher self, with our God, our universe. So, as I understand it, ego has evolved from a need to survive back in 10,000 years ago when we were living in caves, just to survive, to keep us from danger. But now it's connected to my worth. How big's my house? How much is in my bank? What kind of car do I drive? Do people like me? So, it's, for me, one of my purposes and passions is helping people to accept the ego, to allow that it's part of us and that we love it. Well, as in we give it love, but not let it sit there chirping away and keeping us small, and not let us move into the light and what we're meant to create on this planet. So my question for you, Jason, is why do we have the ego, and is it an illusion?
From what I understand, the ego is our way to deal with the 3D reality.
Yeah.
Without the ego, you wouldn't be able to experience the dense 3D reality, because from what I understand, we ask for all this. Anything you see, anything that you experience, you ask for all this. Some form or fashion, you ask for to experience some of it. I don't know if you consider yourself a new soul or an old soul, but a lot of the old souls that are out there wanted to experience these type of things. So without the ego, from what I understand, it would be very hard to experience all this stuff, all these time frames on Earth, whether it's medieval age, the Egyptian age, the Romans, the gladiators, cowboy and Indians. Without the ego, without that personality, you wouldn't have those experiences out there to experience. So like, let's say without the ego, let's say you didn't have the ego, you will always be connected to your higher self, and the higher self knows more. True, everything would be a lot better, but throughout all those times, think about, medieval times, knights, cowboys and Indians, you wouldn't really have all those experiences. You really wouldn't have, the times of the Roman gladiators, or the warriors in Ireland, which made me think of Inez Kelly from the last podcast, and you wouldn't have all these different experiences, and each one is, cherished. Yes, even the Dark Ages, or whether it's the Golden Ages, Dark Ages, Middle Ages, like each one is cherished. Each one has its value to it.
Well, it got us to where we are today. If not, we probably wouldn't be here,
Right. And then from what I understand, since we experienced all this stuff, one of the awesome things you mentioned, the wall, so maybe this would be connected to it as well. Since all that data is already out there and we experienced all these different things, the ups, the downs, all these different, living the good life in Atlantis, and then it became fall and got denser. All that information is out there. So if there is another planet that needs to have that information, or like, hey guys, like, how did y'all do this again? And then I don't know how it worked. I don't know if they'll start spinning the wall around. It's like, say, oh, okay, this time frame y'all did this time frame y'all did that. So, okay, we can use some of those experiences, move it over here to this planet. And that's kind of one of the cool things that I thought as well, that this is not the beginning or the end, that it just continues on. And I thought that was pretty cool. Even humanity's body had its ups and downs. And then it's kind of like we go dense, and then it's kind of like the weather. Like we're tired of the heat. Okay, now we want the coolness. Now we're tired of the snow. Now we want summer. Like we're always looking for the next step, the next age. So even with the human body, from what I understand, is that raise up, like your body, like let's say you was in 5D, now your body is 4D, 5D-ish, and now your body drops down denser and denser. And then that was one of the goals, one of the old programs, is that how dense can you get? And then we get tired of it. It's like, all right, we're done. Let's get back up. Let's raise it back up. 3.8, 3.5. Come on, let's get back up. Let's get to the 4D. And so without the ego, you wouldn't be able to experience all those feelings and dimensions. And then, from what I understand, the ego part is everything that you take growing up becomes part of your ego. Your body type, your DNA, a little bit of your higher self. Yeah. So all this comes into it, and it's like, all right, all this programming gets into you. You start growing up, and now you start changing. You're taught this in school, you taught that in religion class, and now your ego starts to be formed. And now here you are. Now here you are. You're a different individual from you. What are you experiencing, and what are you experiencing? So that's just my thought.
Yeah, similar to mine. Yeah, it serves a purpose, and like I said, when I've read and channeled about the ego, we don't want to get rid of it. It serves a purpose. We have it for a reason, but it is an illusion, in a sense of that, what it's telling you isn't real, and it's easy for you to change it. Like, as in, you can just make a choice and say, right, I'm going to reprogram myself, just like a computer. I spoke to a client last week, and I said, a lot of people are in this overwhelmed state, burnout, minds are too cluttered, anxiety, all this. And I think it's because of technology. We've got so much overload. Now, I said to a client last week, if your PC is full or your phone's full, what do? You declutter it. You get rid of photos. You delete. You
buy the same external hard drive.
We're the same though. We need to declutter. We need to just let go of what's no longer serving us. If we don't, what happens? It breaks. It breaks down. It doesn't work properly. That's the same as us. And I think that's, it's decluttering our outer world and our inner world. So it's, to do the reflection of the two. Now, my house is always clean and tidy, and my partner will laugh because, like, something my friend said yesterday, she said, the state of your house is the state of your mind. I was like, that is so true, because prior to my spiritual journey, I was that typical teenager. My room was always a mess. My mom was always telling me to clean my room.
Right.
And I wasn't spiritually connected then. I mean, obviously I wasn't awake then. But the last 5 years, I've just been a lot more cleaner, tidier. I like my house to be clean, and everything's got its place. Everything's kind of, it's not perfect, but it's my home, it's my space. I've got my little altar here. It's like and I think that is true.
Yeah,
It's
it
the
looked like you
state of
got
my
some
mind.
crystals up there, if I ain't mistaken.
Loads.
See a
Buddha.
rose.
I've got my Disney. I love my Disney ornaments. Yeah,
See a stuffed
I've got my
animal of some sort,
yeah. There's
like a beaver or something.
no, that's Cogsworth off Beauty and the Beast.
Oh, okay. All right. I should have known because I see the rose. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's my
gotcha.
altar, and I've got Saint Francis here, Saint Francis of Assisi. Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah. I'm
That
kind of
Buddha?
I'm finding an Egyptian goddess next to go on there. Yeah,
Okay. Who you
that's what I'm
gonna go
saying.
with?
It makes sense, doesn't it? The state of your surroundings is the state of your mind.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I was like, I'm actually proud that I'm clean and I'm tidy, because it shows that my mind is clean and tidy most of the time.
I do find myself, we've been living in this house for a couple of years now, but I do find myself trying to organize my house better, like
Yeah,
keep things
yeah.
more together,
Mm.
in bins and labeled and everything. So definitely a work in progress. But if I ever need anything, I know what bin to go to. Like, I need batteries. Boom, it's right there.
Yeah,
Flash
yeah, yeah.
there. So you mentioned the Egyptian goddess. Which one were you thinking?
Well, I want to get Sekhmet, but apparently that's what I'm drawn to. But I think I've always been drawn to Isis, so I think I'm going to get an Isis one, and then
I was
maybe a
going to mention
Basset.
ISIS. I know
Yeah,
she's
because
come through in people's sessions, and one of the questions was, "So, how do you feel about um, your name being used with that group, the terrorist group?" And she was like, "I don't like it."
yeah, I can imagine. I think, yeah, I'm really drawn to the Eye of Horus now too. So I've always worn the Ankh. And I've
Hmm.
just been to the spiritual shop to pick up I got some Egyptian cards. I've just been playing with them before I got on with you. And
Oh,
yeah,
nice.
I'm just embracing, because when you start to read new books and you get the call-ins and you follow the bliss. I mean, I'm kind of engrossing myself in Egyptian stuff because I've always loved Egypt. And yeah, I saw this necklace with the Eye of Horus on it, and I was like, oh, I could just buy you right now. But I was like, not yet. It's just you get drawn to certain things, and I think that's kind of what I always say to people who I meet and I'm giving them inspiration is we don't have to have it all figured out. We're not meant to have it all figured out. And one thing that I wanted to see if you resonated with this, Jason, was one of my goals last year was I want to reach enlightenment because I have these specks of enlightenment and it's like feels so good and you just want to love everybody and you just have the waves of everything's okay. You just have those waves and then the next day you wake up and you're like, right, life's shit. What's next? Challenge next. It's like the fluctuation.
Sound
So
like the
one of my
ego kicked
goals,
in.
yeah, it's like the 3D, bring you down to earth.
Uh-huh.
So
You're not done yet.
yeah, one of my goals was like I want to reach enlightenment before I leave the earth. And I channeled a message when I was in Australia before I came to New Zealand, and the universe said, "You're not meant to reach enlightenment on this planet." I was like, "Why? Why? I'm good enough for that, Anna. I deserve that." And the universe laughed, and he's like, she, you will return to enlightenment when you leave your vessel. So you've come to experience life as a human, which will give you specks of enlightenment when you've awoken, which I am now. So I kind of got that. I was like, that's why we have these little specks, because our soul is clearly a part of this full enlightenment source where we came from. But the physical body has got the ego and the brain and the thinking and the all the
Hmm.
extra things that comes with it. So I think
Reality
that's why we
kicks
have
in.
the specks of enlightenment. So I said, okay, so what about like Jesus? Well, he was fully enlightened. And then so he said, well, we send masters to Earth to help the planet ascend. So I said, well, who's the living master now? Because I was thinking, I can't really think of one.
Uh-oh.
And the universe said, there are many, but they aren't masters. They're here to master. So instead of just sending a master to help people ascend and think differently, and like Jesus did and Buddha did, now there are many of us awakening. There are many of us with like these specks of enlightenment, and we're meant to just do our bit, bring our uniqueness, bring our skills, bring our experience, bring our past lives and our information through. And that's why you see these this collective coming together, and again, this universal truth that come from the wall. We've all got access to that, but then you might take that section of the wall, Jason, and I take this section of the wall, and then but they're similar truths. They're just how we perceive them. So I was thinking that's really interesting. Yeah. So I've let go of the goal that I want to be fully enlightened, because I know I'm going to return to that when I've left my vessel. But I just want to I've changed it now, where I want to experience more enlightening moments so I can pass that on to others.
Perfect. Do you think you're an old soul or a new soul?
Oh, yeah.
With you,
very old soul.
Yeah, with you being very interested in ancient Egypt, I find that those individuals are old souls.
I am definitely an old soul. It's something that someone said to me for a while. When I was like 16, 17, 18, I was really mature and I was wise beyond my years. And again, from being a little kid, I was always curious about things. I asked questions that a normal 6-year-old wouldn't ask, So I would say I'm an old soul, but you can feel when you are around a new soul.
Oh,
and I think the new souls do play a vital part, though, don't they? That they're playing their parts, and we're all here to play a part. There's just this is why we could chat hours about this. We should do like a 6-hour series of breaks, and then have a coffee break in between.
That's right.
Next topic.
For tea. All right, next topic.
I know it's that's the same when you find people you resonate with, like I resonate with you. You could sit and talk for hours.
Yeah, same here. I mean, all this stuff I find fascinating, and then every little bit about it, and then it's kind of interesting once when you think you know a certain thing or a certain part of history, it's like, nope, don't forget this part right here. Don't forget. And it's like another layer, and then another layer, and another one.
Yeah, you think, can you get any more spiritual? And you think, oh, that's it. I've had a spiritual awakening. Now I'm awake.
Right.
And then something else happens, and something else happens, and you just get deeper knowledge. And and I'm only 30. I'm 32 in 2 weeks, so I'm like, I'm still got a long way. I always think, when am I going to be in 10 years' time? Thank you. I was just thinking, in 10 years' time, where am I going to be? I've not had any children yet, birth children. I've got 2 stepsons, and I just know for a fact, once I've had kids, that's going to be another level of experiencing birth, and I'm going to do hypnobirthing, and so I'm embracing that in the future. But right now, I'm just embracing being in an ancient land of New Zealand and what it has to offer, and you can feel it. The nature here is another level. It's another level. Nature all over the planet's beautiful, but here you're in nature and you're just like, this doesn't even look real. It looks like it's off Avatar. That's why I think. That's why it's.
Are you a fan of the Lord of the Rings series?
Yeah.
I think some of that was filmed over there. Some of those scenes with the horses was filmed.
I've been to Hobbiton, where it was all filmed. Yeah.
And that was one of my questions. Did you have what made you move to New Zealand? Was it you just knew, or what triggered this? I'm going to move, because you were in the UK, correct?
Yeah, so I always liked travel. So we traveled a lot as kids, and I always knew I didn't want to stay in the UK. I never felt settled in the UK. And before I met Chris, my plan was to move to Australia, because I've got a big connection to Australia, and I love that country. But my partner Chris, his stepchildren were living here. He moved here with his ex-partner 5 years ago, and then he moved back to America when they separated, and then he met me. And I think as people come into your life for divine reasons, someone came into our life 2 years ago in lockdown and asked us some really deep questions, and that kind of led us to the fact we should just move to New Zealand, because that's where we need to be for our purpose and what our mission. My partner does a lot for conservation. He has a podcast called All Creatures Podcast, and millions of downloads. He's doing really well. It's one of the top rated animal podcasts. Yeah, he's just been speaking to the owner of PETA, Ingrid Newkirk. So it's really good podcast. So he just needs to be, with our callings, we need to be where we're going to thrive. Mm-hmm. And home is wherever you are. But I think New Zealand was just this faraway land that I remember being a kid, and we were doing the globe geography, and I remember just spinning the globe, and I just pointed at Australia, and I was like, there, I wonder what it's like to go there. And I've been a couple of times in the last few years. So New Zealand isn't it fascinating that we think about all of our ancestors, and for them surviving, we're here. So again, another deep kind of thought of go back to, like, maybe, we'll go back to ancient Egypt, and just those times, when the kingdoms kind of came 3000 BC. What were my ancestors doing then? Where were they back then? So it's like you have gratitude for them.
Oh, absolutely.
And when you think about it, they're all up there. They're all in spirit behind you, clapping, and
so to answer your question, like, where does it begin? Where, how far back you want to go is the real question. And it's like, the further you go back, then it's like you can go back even further. And it's like, well, what do you mean by that? Like, well, what planet do you want to go to? Because you're, and this has been talked about quite a bit as well. It's like, well, your DNA is just not part of Earth only. Your DNA just didn't develop on Earth. It actually developed eons ago somewhere else. And it's like you have this planet involved, and from what I understand, you got the Palladian stuff. So you got that planet, and then you can go even further back. So now you got another planet, and then another awesome thing that I would like to add was that even the Greys, you can go even further back, and it'll show you like, oh, well, we're related to the Greys as well. And from what I understand, over millions of years ago, they look like us now. It's just when they left their planet, they evolved, and their planet was dying. So they left and they started living in spaceships. But when they started living in these spaceships for over a million years, their bodies started changing. And then they kind of got, I guess you could say, in a way, a different type of ego for them kicked in.
Yeah.
It's kind of an ego of like, well, we already know all this stuff. We have all this technology. We have all this information. We know how to regenerate our bodies. We know how to live forever. We know how to do this. So it's kind of like, I can relate to our ego in the future might try to do something like that. And so they just wind up changing more and more. And then they're like, oh, crap, we changed too much. And now we have to go back.
Yeah, because once you leave Earth, the gravity changes, doesn't it? And you do evolve. So I think, when we evolved from apes and we evolved from different species is the same. Our planet changed. So we had more resources and we could start to evolve. And that's my partner's expertise. He loves evolution. So
nice.
That's another topic we could talk hours about. We need to do a part 2, Jason and Pippa part 2.
Absolutely. Keep any thoughts, information, any future conversations, write them down, and I'll do the same. Anything you would like to share before we wrap things up?
No, I think my last message for people listening is to just have a curious mind and keep an open mind. That's the main
absolutely
thing.
And that's the same thing with me. Even though some information will have conflicts between each other, I still just take the notes, be like, okay, just still have an open mind. Let's just see how this plays out, kind of thing. But I wanted to thank you very much. And I'll have a link in the description for her podcast. And Pippa's going to share this episode on her podcast. And
have your links on there.
Right. So I have 2 YouTube videos. Anything that's ancient Egypt or Atlantis stuff, that information is more on the Guardians of Magic YouTube channel. Anything that deals with the New Earth and New World Order series, or Tracy Mahan, the channel when she's channeling Daniel, all that's on the Q.R.E. network.
Cool. Thanks, Jason. Yeah, I could talk to you for hours, but if I didn't have a client, I'd stay on for longer.
Yeah. Let me know how it goes.
I will.
I'm interested to see if there's any connectivity between the two. Be like,
yeah.
Oh my God.
Thanks, Jason. Enjoy the rest of your evening. I'll speak to you soon.
All right. You take care.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.